I, Phil, I think I can see you. I can't hear you though.
It shows everybody is being muted except for Bob.
Okay.
Hey there, Bob. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi there. How are you doing, Phil?
Good. You're looking fantastic.
Yeah, long time no see. I
Yeah.
think I'm doing this right. I feel it's funny. I do a lot of technology things, but I'm a little new to the Hangout environment. So actually doing a Hangout on air is making me is a little nerve-wracking. But
Well, it's by design because when you're destabilized, your true vulnerability shows, and then we can identify with you empathetically. So we have an experience of oneness that's unachievable unless we're actually physically present. So that's how we create that opportunity. Virtual.
oh, wise one. Thank you. um, so
I'm
I
really excited about this session, and there may be a couple people who join. I just want to make sure that the correct link is now shared in. Um,
Yeah, I linked. I sent you the link in Facebook Messenger. There, I just copied and pasted the one from the top. Is that right?
yeah, and is that the one that is now? Ah, no, we.
Is there another one?
Yeah. Actually, I just want to make sure that that's the one that's pasted for people to join in the sharing, or do you just have people?
Let
Yeah,
me. I can do it again. So there's a little links button at the bottom there in the lower right hand corner, and I took the event page one, but is maybe the
that's the wrong one. I'm going to share
okay.
this one in the Google Doc so that people can join,
Thank you.
and that will take a moment. Um, and are the other two people here? Are they your guests that you've invited?
They're my people.
Okay, awesome. So here we go to, and I'm going to go here. Oops. Awesome. Okay, great. So I have shared it, and there may be a few people who join. In the spirit of getting to know this Google Hangout environment a little better, what I want to say is that so you've started recording, and
Yes.
after this session finishes, you only have the chance to push stop once at the end of the session when you want to stop recording. But
Right.
after it does that, it will go into your YouTube videos, and you'll have the ability to edit. So it might be good to trim off this beginning part and just start at an official beginning.
Sure.
But do you have kind of a presentation or a walkthrough kind of mode that you want to do?
Well, so we have. I do have a little slide deck that's in Google Drive. I was playing around with that a little bit, but I wasn't sure. I was either going to do the screen share or Google Drive it, but I think the screen share is the better option because
Agreed.
I can.
Is it in Keynote or
No,
PowerPoint?
it's actually on
Google Drive.
Google
So
Drive.
yeah, you can just how to. Do you want to just do a quick practice of your screen share, or have you done it already?
Let me just pull that up real quick, and I'll show you.
Yeah.
So we were playing with it a little bit. I know this is the futzing period on this. So can you see that?
Yep. Yeah. So if you want, you can probably go into. You can just use this mode if you want, or you can go into a full screen mode, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, when I went to full screen, it didn't seem to. It didn't seem to like. Can you still see the screen?
Yeah. Yeah. Are you on a Mac?
I am.
There's, yeah. And did you use share full screen or did you share a specific program?
I shared full screen.
Hi, Beto. Your background noise is really loud, so I put you on mute for a second. Feel free to unmute whenever you want to talk.
I can download it though. Maybe that would be a better approach.
No, I think it will work fine for you to share it that way in the outline view.
Okay.
Okay. So one thought would be to just go ahead and start your intro whenever you're ready, and
Sure.
and this will be the whatever point in time what you'll trim to.
Sure.
Do you want to go ahead and do that, or would you want?
I think we can do that. Laura and Barry, you feel okay getting started? Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and start my screen share. Okay, great. All right. Well, good morning from the West Coast. My name is Bob Cole, and I'm an organizer of TEDxMonterey here in Monterey, California. Once upon a time, I believe this was the headquarters for the annual TED event, just literally down the street from my office here. I'm really happy to be here today with a couple of guests to talk to organizers about how TEDxMonterey has been, since the beginning, really experimenting with multilingual live interpretation, simultaneous interpretation of our event. So today we'll talk a little bit about how we've been doing that, and we have a little agenda here. But before we do that, I wanted to also just let my two guests also introduce themselves, Laura Burian and Barry Olsen. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over here to, we'll go ahead and start with Laura. If you'd like to introduce yourself real quick, just say who you are and how you're affiliated with TEDxMonterey, kind of directly and indirectly.
So my name is Laura Burian, and I am faculty here at Monterey Institute. I teach Chinese to English interpretation, and I have been doing that for 14 years now. And I've been involved with TEDx Monterey since its inception because I teach a course that is for all of our second-year graduate students in translation and interpretation, particularly in conference interpretation, where this is a wonderful opportunity for them to work in our simultaneous interpretation booths in the back of the auditorium where the TEDx event takes place, and to interpret what is being said on stage into their various languages. And our languages here include Chinese, French, German, Korean, Japanese, Russian, and Spanish. Did I miss something? I think I got it all.
I think you missed Klingon.
Oh yes, forgot Klingon.
All right. And Barry?
Well, I would simply say I'm also a professor of translation and interpretation at the Monterey Institute of International Studies with Laura Burian. I've been at the Institute for 7 years. I'm also a professional conference interpreter, and have been involved with TEDxMonterey from its inception as well. I had a lot of fun our first year in 2010 when we were trying to figure out how we could kludge together technology to see if we could live stream our interpretation together with the video. So I have the privilege of teaching the same class that Laura referred to, and it's just a great opportunity for us to be here today to talk about our experience.
Thanks, Laura and Barry. I'm going to go see if I can get back to my slides. Are you able to see the slides again?
Yes.
Fantastic. So let's see here. So I see that we don't have any guests directly, maybe directly in our Hangout. Maybe there's folks watching on our Hangout page, but so Phil, you can kind of be our audience here, learning as we discuss. We have a bit of a presentation. I think that when we were talking about how to share and talk about the possibility of multilingual events, we thought we would start and talk a little bit about what we've been able to do. I think what we do here in Monterey is unique and it's partly unique because of our actual, where we hold our event. We hold our event at the Institute, Monterey Institute's auditorium here, which is a space that has the capability to do this. But our presentation this morning is we want to kind of talk about trends in language and technology. We're going to talk specifically about the technology that we've been playing with and using here, and kind of really bootstrapping together. And we want to talk about talent, the talent that's required for simultaneous interpretation to do it right. And then we want to talk about the relevance. Why even attempt to do what we've been doing? What have we seen? What are some of the ripple effects of our experiment in simultaneous interpretation? And then perhaps just talk a little bit about possibilities. And that may be a conversation that's that we have here with the folks on the Hangout. I don't know if there'll be anybody that will be posting questions, but we could certainly talk about that. I was at the TEDx Summit in Doha a couple of years ago, and when I talk about this multilingual capacity, people get excited about it, and I think TED is certainly, from what I've seen with the Open Translation Project, we certainly recognize the amazing ability of that effort and that movement. I think what we're doing here is just a little bit of a different piece of that, and I'd like Laura and Barry to talk a little bit about their expertise and what they bring to that. Our event here in Monterey, with the interpreting piece anyway, is really about inviting, kind of taking a learning approach even to the multilingual aspect of it, because we work with student interpreters who are pre-professional interpreters. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next slide here, see if this works here. And I'm going to hand it over to Barry to talk a little bit about. We just thought this is in the news this week. And Barry, why don't you talk a little about what's going on here with Microsoft and Skype, because I think it raises the language issue is being raised all over the place, and the promise and maybe the uncertainty of what this means for people in language.
Sure, Bob, thanks. I'm happy to do that. And I'm actually very glad that you've included this slide, because one thing that we have seen is the elimination of time barriers and space barriers, making it possible for people to connect over long distances, to be able to see each other, share documents. And really, if you look at all of the aspects that involve human communication, the one remaining barrier that is truly significant is language. How do you help people communicate across languages? And so in typical fashion, what we've seen is technology companies, since they've been able to resolve a lot of the other problems through technology, throw a lot of technology, a lot of brain power, and a lot of money at the language issue. And the simple fact of the matter is, and this is my personal opinion, but when we talk about language and communication, we're talking about one of the most human aspects of humanity. And so handing that off immediately to technology to say, oh, we've resolved that now, because if you were to believe the headlines that you've seen this week, you would think, okay, Microsoft's done that, fixed, all taken care of, just like Google Translate took care of things, a few years back. And people kind of check that box off mentally and say, okay, we're there. But the reality is, we're there for some things that are really nice, but we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. Do we really want to see a TEDx presentation that is full of emotion, candor, and just excitement run through a speech recognition program, put into a machine translation algorithm, and then spit out on the other end with a synthesized voice? Probably not, although that may work really well for some short Skype conversations. So I think what I would say is, we see all these trends with language and technology. What we need to keep in mind is, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and then we can assign what kind of language service is going to be needed to actually do that. That said, there are some amazing things happening, and I think we may mention this a little bit later, with .sub and providing the subtitles of a lot of TED Talks. It's a great way to go about it ex post. But what we're going to be talking about today is how we've been able to integrate the technological element together with the human talent to create the magic that makes it possible to communicate ideas worth sharing across languages. So I'll probably stop there, Bob, and I think we'll move on to the technology portion now.
Awesome.
Great.
Great.
Yeah, and Phil, just if you have any, if you feel like you need to pace us or anything, please let us know.
I don't really, because there's so much information in what you have to share. I will just pause for just a second and mention that yesterday, June Cohen from TED mentioned that translation and getting TEDx talks translated and bridging to the OTP community is a high priority, and it's something that they want to focus on in the coming year. And Ruta and a number of events are doing live simultaneous translations in addition to yours, including one yesterday from the presidential palace in Poland that was opened and hosted by the president of the country of Poland. So this is important, and there are there's a lot of ongoing conversation about this. So you're contributing important pieces to this, so thank you. And keeping an eye on what will be relevant for other TEDx organizers is a great filter through which to share what you have to offer here. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great. And I hadn't attended the other hangouts on this topic, so you are obviously up to speed on all of that, given the program. So I appreciate that. I'd like to next just talk a little bit about our context here, and I'm excited to hear, I had heard a little bit about the TEDx Warsaw Presidential Palace event. I did not hear about the fact that there was interpreting going on, which I think is great. So, and I think that is actually one interesting, I know that you're using the terminology live translation. Our experts here would hope that we would start using the language live interpretation, because that is actually the professional terminology. But that's perhaps nitpicking when we're talking about the possibilities here.
So just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
So one goal, obviously, is for us to make accessible a number of the key terminology points that you use in academia or in the field of translation, so that those become normative in the TEDx community, without trying to get too buried in jargon. So finding the balance for that, like you would in any TED Talks,
yes.
And this idea that translation is written and interpreting is spoken, that would be a great thing for us to do on the TEDx 101 on translation, which still hasn't been done.
You sure? Well, and so that kind of leads me to why I've invited Laura and Barry here. We did a demonstration of this at our last TEDx event, TEDxMonterey event in April, and so we actually have a TEDx talk with the two of them, actually three of them, actually five of them. It was Laura, Barry, Barry Olsen, and Miguel Garcia. Did a demonstration of consecutive interpreting, where Miguel Garcia did a live demonstration taking notes on the stage while Barry was speaking in Spanish, and then he followed up with an English interpretation of Barry's remarks into English, and then we followed up with that. So this video is, I think, a really great example, and it could be used as the tool that actually explains how to move forward with the terminology. They start out with that, and we followed up with both Barry and Laura speaking in Spanish and Chinese respectively, with the assistance of interpreters at our event. So it's an 11-minute talk that talks about the possibilities here. Also, so it could be an interesting talk to build on for these efforts. So I'm gonna move next to Laura, or maybe before I do that, I'll just say what we do here in Monterey really quickly is that we have a venue that affords us the ability to interpret simultaneously, so live translation or really live interpretation simultaneous in-house. So we have radio receivers that all of the participants, the guests, can receive if they want to listen to the interpreting that's going on into other languages. Most of our talks have been in English, and we just have been using this as an added feature. However, this year we really wanted to feature the interpreting piece, and so we purposely asked both Laura and Barry to conduct a demonstration in I would say their second languages, their B languages, Spanish and Chinese. And then our audience was able to experience what it's like to listen to an interpretation. The other layer, though, that we've been able to do, that we've been playing with, is we also stream. For each of our 4 interpreting booths is connected to a Mac Mini in our control booth, and we've been able to stream those that audio back out onto the web with our live stream video. So our live stream video we're putting out on the web using livestream.com, and then the audio stream is separate. We haven't found an integrated solution to be able to do multiple channel alternate language simultaneous interpretation. We haven't found one tool that will do that. So we've taken live stream, and then we've embedded, we've partnered with another little tool called Mixlr, M-I-X-L-R, and we've embedded separate audio streams underneath the video. And so we've kind of created 4, or I should say 5, separate pages where the event can be viewed over the web, and then you would turn on the interpreting booth, say, for a particular session. So if session 2 we have Chinese interpretation, you would be able to go to that. We post the schedule, you turn on the audio stream and mute the English stream or turn it down, and you're able to watch the event in that language, if that makes sense. That's a technology that we've been playing with. But I want to move on to Laura here and have her talk about talent and how working with interpreters. It's an important piece of working with interpreters is it's professional project management and all of that. So it's not just adding on this language element. We're really it really affects the way that we work with our presenters, and it also has afforded us the ability for these student interpreters to get real-world practice in working with presenters, people who are doing talks. So Laura, if you want to say a little bit about your experience there.
Sure. I wanted to just back up for a second. Barry, did
Sure.
you want to make a comment on the technology first?
Actually, yes, I did. I was just going to mention, Bob, thanks for explaining how we've been doing it at TEDxMonterey. I did want to point out that there are, of course, technologies out there to be able to do all of the multi-channel audio mixing and to have that combined with the video feed. But there's an important principle, particularly for the TEDx conferences, that are working on a lot of dedication and excitement among the organizers, and people are very driven to do this because they believe in the ideas and in the model. And you can resolve any of these technical issues if you've got a lot of money to throw at it. But what you need to find, of course, as we've discovered at TEDxMonterey, is you need to find the sweet spot to where you can say, this is what we need to achieve, this is what we have, these are the resources we have available, so let's see what we're actually able to do. And that's a key element as you try to introduce language interpretation into a TEDx conference. And there are certain things that you have to have, and then there are some things that are nice to have. And it's important to focus on the have to have so that things can go well. So I just was going to throw that out there.
Thanks, Barry. That's great. And we can certainly follow up if there's other questions, or maybe this will lead into some further discussion about what that might look like Laura, do you want to talk a little about how to work with interpreters and your experience with the student interpreters that we've been able to work with over the last couple of years?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Bob, for that. I think one of the first things, our student interpreters are graduate students who are, by the time TEDx comes around, they're about a month away from graduation. So they have put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into learning the art of simultaneous interpretation. There's an assumption out there, I think, a lot of people have the assumption that if you're bilingual, you can be an interpreter. But for those of us in the profession, we would beg to differ. And it really does take quite a bit of specialized training, in particular, to be able to do simultaneous interpretation, because you have to have very good split attention skills in which you are listening to the incoming source language at the same time that you're processing that and thinking about how to put it into the target language, and then putting it into the target language while you're still listening to new information coming in. TED Talks in general tend to be delivered hard, fast, and compactly. And so they, in trying to get across such a lot of information in the limited time of a TED Talk, it's really important that our interpreters, our student interpreters, are on top of the message and learn as much about the message that the speakers want to get across in advance, so that they can do their research and get to know, for instance, about the marine ecology of the Monterey Bay. That was a topic that was very focused on last year, for instance. But with such specialized talks, it's really important for us to get to know the background in advance as much as possible. And that's where I think, in TEDxMonterey, working so closely with the organizers has been extremely helpful, because, and as Bob said, hopefully it's helpful for the organizers from their perspective as well, because we require of our speakers that they give us some kind of an outline of the speech, and preferably even maybe a script for their speech as much in advance as possible. Bob, what exactly are the deadlines that you set for the speakers in that regard?
Yeah, hold on one second. Let me just turn off my screen share here, see if I can. There we are. Yeah, so as you say, Laura, there's an upside to working with interpreting and having that be a piece of our event, and that exactly, and other organizers do this as well. And but the real key is that it's really a couple of months out. I mean, we have a series of kind of cascading deadlines that we try to enforce and use to help in the coaching process with our presenters. But so outlines, having slides come in, we use box.com to manage all of the content, and we basically share that box.com space with our interpreting team. And so a transcript, it's not even a transcript, but a script and outlines, and even as the talk is developing, we share drafts with the interpreters as much as we can, so that they're up to speed on and are able to do research if there's a technical, if a talk has some technical jargon, or if it's scientific, or if it's a specialized area. It allows the interpreters to be as prepared as possible. You certainly wouldn't want to, if you were doing this, you wouldn't want to assign an interpreter to interpret your TEDx talks at the last minute. This is really about professionalizing your project management work with language professionals, and so we've had a lot of success over the years, and we've had a lot of learning as well, kind of jointly in doing this. Laura, does that kind of sound about right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think, one of the main things is for the organizers of the event to be in really good touch with the organizers of the interpretation, so that we can make sure that we all know. And it's interesting, because there is, among our student interpreters in particular, they have this very strong desire to say, okay, in our booth, the nature of simultaneous interpretation is that you trade off every 20 minutes with your partner, because you cannot continue to interpret for more than 20 minutes at a time without starting to lose quality. And so, as such, when you are doing this trade-off, the interpreters like, as much as possible, to say, okay, so we know this is the order of the speakers, And so you'll take this speaker, I'll take that speaker, you'll take this speaker, I'll take that speaker. And the hope is that I only have to prepare for the speakers that I'm going to interpret. But as we all know, the reality on the ground is things might change last minute. And so it's a really good learning experience for the interpreters to realize that they have to get to know every single TEDx speaker that's going to be interpreting, or sorry, that's going to be speaking during the session in which they'll be interpreting, because there is a chance that things might flip around. And so it really does open them up, I think, to seeing things from the organizer's perspective, which is very important for interpreters to do as well.
Laura, this is Barry. I wanted to just cut in here really quickly and mention that one of the great things that TEDxMonterey does to help keep the flow of information between the interpreter team and the organizers is, from the get-go, there are 2 chief interpreters assigned to the task of liaising with the TEDx organizing team and the interpreters who will be working in the booths on a given day. If you think about it, we've got 4 interpreting booths, and we have 3 sessions, and each booth has either 2 or 3 interpreters in it. So you're actually managing a team easily of more than 20, 25 interpreters for a one-day TEDx event at the Monterey Institute. So that's a fair amount of coordination and communication. But when you have those 2 chief interpreters involved from the very beginning, you're able to make it flow well, and it makes it possible for the interpreters to be prepared, get information, and to contribute to the success of the event.
Thanks, Barry. We can move on. I think the next little piece that we want to talk about was kind of the relevance. Again, it's kind of getting back to why. And I'm going to just turn my screen share back on, see if this works here. Screen share. That's what we want. There we go. Barry, do you want to talk a little bit about this? You guys used this quote in your demo of simul and consecutive interpretation, and I thought it was it really does speak to kind of the relevance and perhaps also leading into some possibilities here. We have the Open Translation Project, but that the larger TED community and the kind of the larger translation community has been involved in. Why did you guys use this quote in your talk, and what might this mean for the relevance of kind of considering simultaneous interpretation? And I know, Laura, you also have a good story to share that that ties into some of the things that we've been doing with this with interpreting.
Well, I'll go ahead and start, and then Laura, it'd be great for you to share the story that you have. We use this quote mainly because it helps people understand quickly why it is that being able to share an idea in someone's native language is important. Again, TED is all about ideas worth spreading and sharing, and that's where the relevance of using simultaneous interpretation comes in. I'd like to mention the concepts of synchronicity and asynchronicity, because TEDx Live, when you're there physically, it's a synchronous event. Everybody is connected, everybody is watching the person on stage, and there's an opportunity for real connection. There's an asynchronous part to TED as well, in that the videos are then posted online afterwards. And that's why the Open Translation Project works well, because you get the subtitles and people are able to understand the ideas ex post by reading the subtitles in their own language if they don't speak the language of the original talk. And that's great. However, it's asynchronous. Live simultaneous interpretation allows your audience to connect with the speaker. Now, there's an interesting thing I'd point out here, and that is, at TED events, for the most part, you're going to have a dominant language. And more often than not, that's been English. That's changing, and that's exciting to see. But it's been English, and everyone comes, the speakers speak in English, the audience understands English, and so the connection is there. What we did with our TEDx talk, again, to try and sensitize our audience to multiple languages, multilingualism, and using interpretation was requiring them to have to use an interpreter to be able to understand what it is Laura and I wanted to share with them. And so we had to provide headsets for everybody in the auditorium, some 250 people, because there were some people who spoke Chinese and some who spoke Spanish, but for the most part, everyone understood English and not the other languages used. And so this means that they had to have the headset on. And it meant that if they didn't have the headset tuned to the right channel, they were worried because they felt that they were missing something, because they wanted that connection. They wanted the synchronicity. And so I think that's one of the reasons why our TEDx talk was well received, because it really allowed people to connect through the interpreter, and that allowed them to understand the importance of interpretation. So this is also the case if you're looking to spread your ideas beyond your local audience. If you are able to stream your TED event live in multiple languages, then those ideas are going to be shared in multiple languages. We've had wonderful experiences having people let us know from Spain, from China, and from other countries to say, we loved listening to TED. It was marvelous, and it was just great to be able to listen in Spanish or to be listening in Japanese or whatever the language may have been that they were listening to. And so there's a real opportunity for important ideas to, if I can say, break the bonds of the language they are in, and through simultaneous interpretation, synchronously move out to these other cultures and other peoples. And I think, Laura, this would be a great time for you to share the experience that you had mentioned to Bob and me yesterday.
Yeah, the story that I had shared with them is that last year's TED event had a very moving speech that an Afghani woman gave about living in exile and her father's experience of living in the United States, and as he started to become senile, not really knowing where home is and having that sense that he was always away from home, and then going back to Afghanistan but being confused about that being home. So there was a really interesting dialogue that was brought out through this talk. And when I was listening to the talk, and when I was listening to the Chinese interpretation of the talk, I thought immediately of somebody I know who is a prominent human rights activist from China who needed to hear this message, because I think a lot of people who are living in their non-native land, and particularly those living in exile, have this very difficult time with the definition of home and the feeling of longing, but not knowing exactly what you're longing for at times. And so I actually got the permission of the interpreter, and I sent the sound file to this human rights activist who happens to be blind. And he was, when he received the file, he said he listened to it twice. It brought tears to his eyes. It was very moving and very relevant to him. Without the interpretation, he would not have been able to have heard this message at all, because he can't read it online. He could have perhaps found some tools for getting it translated and then, you know, getting the information, but really it was amazing to me that he was able to really relate very much to the message of this Afghani writer through listening to the interpretation of that talk.
So thanks, Laura. So in a nutshell, this is what we talk about when we say relevance. Saying, oh, hey, great, let's go ahead and do simultaneous interpretation and think about it at the last minute just because you want to say you're multilingual isn't necessarily going to lead to success. It really is an issue of looking at what you have, you want to share those ideas, what would be the appropriate way to do that, and then taking the steps necessary in planning and execution to make it happen so that that connection can take place. And again, I just want to highlight the importance of synchronicity, when you're talking about the live idea and the audience connecting, whether they're remote or whether they're in the venue where the conference is taking place.
Do you actually have an answer to that question about when, like you ask, you have to think about when it's worth doing, but from a TEDx event perspective, when do you feel like you meet that threshold of when is it important to do a simultaneous translation?
Well, I think that,
interpretation.
Yeah, interpretation. Hey, thank you. Actually, that is a very relevant question, and the answer is going to differ for each event. For our event, it was a no-brainer. We had the technology and the infrastructure basically in place, except for the streaming, which we had to figure out. We had the student interpreters who were looking for this opportunity. They had friends and family all over the world that were very keen on hearing them work. And the ideas that we were sharing were very important. So it really was a perfect storm for us to do this, and it's why we've done it every year for the last 5.
How widespread are these kinds of resources, or are you the only place in the world that has this? Is it in every major city has an interpretation center or interpretation schools?
Again, that's
ignorance.
Well, that's a great question. In most large urban areas, there will be providers of interpreting equipment that will be available for rental. There will be interpreters who are trained in simultaneous interpretation, and so you can put those things together. And you'll have to look at what that is going to cost for your event and to be able to talk to folks. TED has been doing simultaneous interpretation for many years. In fact, a number of our colleagues here at the Monterey Institute have worked at the big TED conferences as interpreters. And I spoke with one of the language services organizers yesterday that's been doing TED for many, many years, basically since its inception. And as I mentioned to her that we were going to be having this hangout, she said, one of the things that's important to keep in mind is for these many TEDx events is that planning piece that we talked about, because she told me all sorts of experiences of getting called at the last minute or trying to figure out how to do it, how can I say, with the least amount of resources possible. And it's important to use resources effectively, but by the same token, if you don't invest enough resources into the equipment and into the talent that is needed to do this, then you're not going to get the desired result. So it's finding that sweet spot, and it's something that these larger conferences can do. I don't know about the TEDx Warsaw conference, and I'd like to learn a lot more, but I would assume that they had a reason for wanting simultaneous interpretation. It could have been a very compelling speaker that didn't speak Polish, that they wanted to have share his or her ideas, and they wanted their dominant audience in Polish to understand those ideas. It may have been that they wanted to project Polish ideas to the rest of the world or the European Union and to get those across in other languages. So if you want to sort of take it from the TEDx organizer's perspective, I'd love to share for a few minutes and we could have a dialogue about that. But I don't want to interrupt your presentation, so maybe you could.
No, go ahead, Phil. I think it's useful. What we really wanted to talk about here today is and I think we are unique. I mean, I think the venue and our resources here, obviously, we're a little bit of an outlier in that sense. But in some sense, I think maybe that could be useful in terms of looking at what's next for TEDx, or even what's next for, we've been talking about we're kind of on the possibilities section of our presentation anyways, so, but having a TEDx organizer's perspective, I think, is really helpful. Go for it.
All right, so where most TEDxers are at today is that they do their event, most of the talks are in English, but again, a huge number and percentage are based in other countries where they have non-English talks as their dominant language, and their talks are done in the other language. So those are two very common cases. Mm-hmm. The process that currently, what is most commonly done is we're trying to get to the hurdle of transcribing your talk and then transcribing it in English. Once it's transcribed in English, then TED can review it, and it can be considered for greater amplitude through the TED.com website. So once it's transcribed in the native language, then the Open Translator project can then take it and begin that translation. So I'd say 99% of the effort is in this ex post manner of translating the transcripts of the talks into other languages. And in many cases, and I bet this is the case in Poland, though I don't know, there are many talks that are in a small local language which will need an international, quote unquote, international or global language like English to attract a wider audience. So you have many talks that are doing in a position where de facto translation makes a lot of sense for them.
Yeah.
So, and then there's the question about case-by-case translations into specific target languages for certain specific talks. And then beyond that is the question about, all right, wow, we're able to hum along all of these channels. We're transcribing all of our talks. We've got relationships with good translation resources in our communities or globally, and that workload is managed. Then people will think about, okay, how can we do live simultaneous interpretation? And there were, an event at the TEDx UN Plaza last year where it would have been a perfect site for us to be doing global translations, scrollable interpretation, or international interpretation in 10 or whatever languages. But the resource hurdle is a huge one, and then identifying the value of that key point you made earlier, synchronicity of communication. And I guess one question I definitely had was, do you use the transcript post-event and use subtitling afterwards, and that the primary function of the interpretation is really real-time during the event? Or do you preserve the interpreted audio and use that as dubbed overview? I know TED is considering both options, but I'd be interested in your feedback on that, and any bridging point across what I shared just now.
I can speak to real briefly. Having done this for a few years, the resource piece and the additional layers that transcribing and capturing the audio from the interpreting booth. So we focus on the synchronicity piece of it. We are not doing extra post-production where which we certainly could. We could probably select some certain talks to do this, but again, as you know as well, Phil, the work does not end once your event is over, and so we're in post-production right now, and just getting through that with that first layer is a lot of work to manage it and to get it out in time. I think even with the Open Translation project, that's something that we haven't fully engaged with ourselves. We've been focused more on the simultaneous piece. And perhaps trying to just kind of almost have it be kind of an experimental layer of our event. So where we're talking about how, what's possible here, I think this is really, I think we're really kind of more in this kind of incubating this idea, but working with top-notch resources and people and we have this in-house expertise right here in Monterey that we can leverage. So, and I guess also related to that, we have had some of our presenters even from this year actually have an interest in us following up with transcribing, getting a clean transcription of their talks so that we can move talks into the OTP, into the Open Translation project. But again, we haven't fully engaged in that, and that's mostly a people and resource issue on our team. Really taking it up. We also have regular jobs that we all do. This is all a volunteer.
I don't believe you.
Yeah, you don't believe me, right? Yeah. So as much as my little nook here is all plastered with TEDx, we also have a job. I have a family. I have kids. I have all that. So it's I think it's an interesting question of, and I think again why Barry's saying that what's so special about us here in TEDx Monterey is we are kind of doing it because we can. but we also think it's really exciting. It's a really exciting space to be in. You know, Laura's story about the power of a talk, and hearing a talk about a refugee status, a Afghan family and refugee status, and then that being interpreted into Chinese simultaneously live, and somebody somewhere listening, hearing that talk in Chinese and being inspired to connect. You know, that's one of those things that's somewhat intangible. It's one of those things that it's hard for us to measure. But I think one of the possibilities here, and that we talked about, Barry and Laura and I talked about yesterday when we were kind of discussing, you know, this hangout, was really it's kind of a what if. What if you were able to what if you were able to have a TEDx event where all of the presenters were non-native speakers, for example?
Oh, what I love it. So we actually did one of my TEDx's. The theme was gained in translation, and it would exactly be that kind of an experience. And during the call yesterday with June Cohen, it did come up that we should do a Translators Day, which would be a global hangout gathering, kind of like this one. And you know, I apologize if we don't have a lot of people here today, obviously.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Yesterday we had mostly full sessions, so you know, it's where there are people, we can convene around a topic, and we have been having these fascinating conversations with people from multiple continents, simultaneously thinking together. And if language is one fewer barrier, and to get beyond the bonds of language, it's a brilliant thing. So it's more than a what if, it's a why not. And it's and if you want to get passionate, it's a why the heck not, and it's about time. And you know, when you go back to 2006 and you think about Wade Davis's talk about ethnosphere and how every language does contain its own universe that begs for translation, because we are an interpreting species in so many ways, and so many ideas do interpret, and we rely on language as an incredible bridge, and there's no reason for ideas to be landlocked within single languages when they deserve the intercultural interfaces that interpreters are.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to just briefly address the question that you had asked about, you know, should we have the subtitles afterwards? Should we have the live simultaneous interpretation recorded and use that, or should we dub based on perfected simultaneous interpretation afterwards? And that is a little bit of a tough question, because simultaneous interpretation being as it is, there will always be imperfections. And a lot of interpreters out there in the field are very reluctant to have themselves recorded, because they don't want their imperfections to be permanent. They want them to have been passing ships in the night, and then it's gone, it's out there, and it's not recorded. So, and it was interesting because our talk was interpreted into English and by non-native English speakers. And so, of course, for me, as a native English speaker listening to the interpretation, I thought, well, maybe it could have been phrased this way, or maybe it could have been shifted a little bit that way, listening to the interpretation of what I had said in Chinese being interpreted into English. But you have to be careful, because, I mean, talk about a time sink for resources. It can take 5 minutes of tape time, can take hours and hours and hours of your time if you're going for that perfection. So then you have to ask yourself the question of, well, what am I really striving for here? Am I striving for basic communication? Am I striving for absolutely ensuring that there are no mistakes whatsoever, or somewhere in between? Because, for instance, you know, when we looked at our TED Talk pre and post editing, you know, I thought, well, we could do this, we could do that. You know, how far do you want to take that? So I think that's a question that has to be really very carefully looked into. So,
you know, like one practice is to take would the TED way be to address that question, and the TED answer to that question is that you're not beautiful instead of being perfect. You're beautiful because of your imperfections. So to find a way to not only live with them, but to recognize that those are things that create authenticity, that can create a kind of bond and connection that is worth having. Definitely.
Yeah, Phil, I would just point out that as we thought about what we could actually do, we, in anticipation of the video and think we're going to get this out there, we had the interpreters record themselves. And so when you watch the video now, that actually is the interpretation that the audience listened to live. And it does have imperfections in it. But the interesting thing is the results that we've seen, the comments that people have made, is that, oh, this was wonderful. And the audience as well. The connection and the synchronicity happened. And so that's the key point. I do think that, you know, these other options that are out there are great. And it is a question, what are you trying to achieve with the video? And when it's asynchronous, and do you want it to be subtitles? But if it's subtitles, you're limiting yourself to people that can actually read. But
but again, the answer, we can take all of our answers to these questions, or from TED, which is what is the purpose? The purpose is the spreading of the idea. So fidelity and clarity, or I don't know, what are there are two poles of translations art, the art of translation. Yes, it's the fidelity and authenticity of that communication as experienced and understood across the language barrier. Those would be goals that TEDx organizers would have.
Well said. Barry, do you want to respond to that real quick, or we're close to our wrap-up time, so I thought maybe we can try to recap what we've discussed here. But did you want to respond real quick, Barry?
Just to say that I agree, and what is most important is to get the idea out. And the great thing is you've got this plethora of possibilities, and organizers just need to think about this at the beginning. It shouldn't be an afterthought, and it shouldn't be an add-on at the last minute, because if you get it in at the beginning, you're going to have a lot more success during and after the event.
Yeah.
Love it.
Great. Perhaps what I could do real quick is just show a little piece of that YouTube video, and I've got it queued up here, I think. We'll see if this works. Yeah. I'll just start from the beginning here and then see if this works. Let's see.
So you need to go to screen share and switch over if you want to.
I don't know that. I was using the YouTube. I was trying to use the YouTube.
Don't do that. It's better.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it has been known to work.
All right. Let me do that then real quick. Hold on. Okay. Thanks for the tip. And then so screen share and YouTube start. Is that working?
And you can maximize the screen, and turn the volume up.
I would like to talk about simultaneous interpreting, which is very important to many international organizations.
And you need to switch your screens. We're seeing your face now. Shoot. You can't maximize it.
Yeah.
You may have noticed now I'm speaking in Chinese instead of English, but on a headset.
Escape.
Yeah, just a sec.
I'm sorry, it would be so nice if this was straightforward.
Of course, I am not a man. My interpreter is a guy. He is interpreting my Chinese speech into English, and the other interpreters are interpreting from his English into French and Korean. So simultaneous interpreting can provide us convenience. Sometimes people think that being bilingual is enough, but this is not enough. First of all, you must have many background knowledges, and second, you must be a good multitasker. Why?
So I'm just going to stop it there, and we can certainly post the link. Let me just turn this off real quick. I want to just say this global gathering is quite something, and it's been really fun to be a part of it and to jump into the conversation, and perhaps the Hangout recording will be of use in other TEDx organizers just thinking about the language. Language is not necessarily a barrier, but as an opportunity. I think that's certainly the way that we approached we approach things here with our event. We see it as a bit of a space to innovate and to engage pre-professional interpreters, to engage our expertise here in Monterey, and then also to experiment with technology. With our limited resources, with our smaller TEDx event here, and so we really enjoyed kind of having the opportunity to reflect on our event this year and on our demonstration, the demonstration that Laura and Barry were able to, and Miguel Garcia, who also did consecutive demonstration at our event. So thank you, Phil, for hosting, and thank you for TEDx and TED for putting this together. Laura, thank you for your time today, and also thank you, Barry. And we would love for our little, our demonstration, I should say our little TEDx Monterey demonstration of simultaneous and consecutive interpretation to get shared around. Phil, I don't know if there's a precedent for a trilingual TEDx talk. I'd be curious to know if anybody else has attempted it or has pulled it off. We think that we might be the first, and I don't know if we get bragging rights for that, but we certainly would love to have those.
I did just want to add real quick, Phil had said it would be nice to have sort of a 101 introduction for simultaneous interpretation or using interpretation in your event, and I do believe that our 12-minute talk can probably serve that purpose.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks to everybody.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.